Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with practical tips to boost your marketing efforts? You are in the right place. I'm Jenn Mancusi, your host of Marketing Demystified. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Very excited to talk about this topic today. It's a hot one. And we're talking about websites. Websites have always had to impress two audiences: the people that are visiting your site, your customers, your prospects, your audience, and the robots that are crawling your site. Back when we just had to worry about SEO, the robots were matchmakers, connecting people and the right websites, and now they're answering questions on their own. So of course, I'm talking about generative AI, and for marketers, it's raising a really important question. If AI is generating the answers, how do you make sure that your brand is part of it? A few weeks ago, Ann Smarty walked us through the basics of SEO, AEO, and GEO, and the multitude of other acronyms that are out there. And this week, we're going to go a little deeper into some of the tactics. So I'm joined by Guy Yalif. Guy is currently Chief Evangelist at Webflow, where he spends his time talking with marketing leaders about how they're approaching AI search. Before Webflow, he co-founded and led Intellimize, an AI-driven website personalization platform acquired by Webflow in 2024. So needless to say, this is his area of expertise. Today, we're walking through what answer engine optimization really means, the 4 pillars of AEO: content, technical, authority, and measurement, and where most marketers should start. So let's get going. Welcome to the show, Guy.
Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for joining. I really am too. I think there's so many questions out there about this topic right now. And a lot of people, marketers, founders, business leaders alike, are wondering, what do I do? Where do I start? And how do I make sense of this rapidly changing landscape? So I'm excited to dig in.
Me too.
So let's start with the 4 pillars, which I mentioned in the intro. You've made the case that AEO is an expansion of SEO and not a replacement. We love to hear that. And you've organized your AEO framework into those 4 pillars. Can you elaborate on what those 4 pillars are and talk about how SEO plays a role?
Absolutely. And we'll share just a bit of context on the data that backs this up. I've had the privilege of being in and out of search for 18 years. I had the privilege of being at one of the 2 great companies that did Search 1.0. Sadly, the wrong one. I was at Yahoo. But it was a great experience there. I've been a CMO and a CEO and bring to bear lots of conversation, original research, talking with other thought leaders and hundreds of CMOs each quarter. So why an expansion, not a replacement? You know, I do hear some people saying SEO's dead, and I could not disagree more. The death of SEO has been called prematurely multiple times. Social was going to kill it. Mobile was going to kill it. Good AEO has a really heavy overlap with what good SEO always should have been. Like genuinely valuable content that helps your prospects through the funnel. Fundamentally, that gets rewarded. Your SEO team is your AEO team. Your SEO agency is your AEO agency. Okay, so what are those differences? Those are the 4 categories where if you think about expanding from SEO to AEO, I invite CMOs to evaluate their team and structure their work. I invite practitioners to think about framing their work and taking specific action in 4 different categories, the ones you mentioned. It begins with content, where we were optimizing for keywords, and now we are answering questions, the real ones prospects are actually asking. Technical, where SEO hygiene still matters, but LLMs, they are constantly trading off how expensive is it not for me to crawl your site, that's super cheap, but to ingest and process the site versus how good is the content. And a lot of the work in technical is making this super cheap for them to do. Then you've got authority, where we all spent 15, 20 years cultivating backlinks, and they still matter. Don't stop them. But given how LLMs work, they are looking for consensus and popularity. So widespread positive mentions, links optional, are really valuable. And finally, in measurement, we go from keyword ranking being the thing to a bunch of terms we're used to talking about in PR, like share of voice, sentiment, accuracy, message pull through. And with humility, I think now is the time for people to focus on these 4 categories because it's early days in a new medium. ChatGPT and the rest of search are under 2% of total search, growing exponentially rapidly, but genuinely useful because they are.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's so interesting, first of all, I just have to say for the record, I fully agree. SEO is not dead. It hasn't been dead. It's such a strong and critical foundation for good AEO is to be optimized for search. If you did nothing else and just continued to optimize for search, you would be better off than people that are not kind of looking at it at all.
To your point, Jen, 52% of Google's AI overview entries are in the top 10 search results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think is interesting about that is the concept of RAG. And basically the AI engines or the AI overviews are doing what the humans did. They're searching the web for the answer, right? So you have to be optimized for search first in order to show up there. And then the other thing that I think is really interesting that you talked about in the authority piece is mentions and not necessarily links. There's so much citation and sources in the AI engines about your brand from other places. And there are some that you have very little control over and almost no control over, and some that you have a ton of control over, which is, where we can focus our energy, right? Like, what are the things we can control versus what can't we? And how do we influence those areas? And I know we're going to talk in a few minutes about a recent study that I read from Tom Solo from Ahrefs with all of this SEO, AEO data. And I have some questions on what you might think about some of those things. But some of the sources of those citations, like it's not necessarily coming from your website. So that authority strategy is maybe even more important than it used to be when we were just thinking about backlinks.
I am very, very much with you. The LLMs fundamentally, technically, they're looking for consensus. They're looking to see the same thing repeated over and over again. Each time they see something said about your brand, it's a little bit like you teaching your kids something. It's another rep that they remember. And in my humble opinion, that means like brand is back to the extent that brand is about us consistently telling our story everywhere. And PR is back, especially digital PR, because it causes us to show up everywhere. Having you do thought leadership, having your executive team do the podcast, do the webinar, do the talk, publishing original research, those are extra rewarded now, and they're rewarded quickly because, just as you said, the LLMs are searching virtually every single query. And so you can have an impact really quickly, right? In search, you had to wait weeks, months to build authority through backlinks. In LLMs, you can have an impact tomorrow, not metaphorically tomorrow, not cherry picked one example tomorrow, practically tomorrow. And I individually presume at some point that'll shift as they build their own stratified crawls of the web. Google's got the best one of those in the world, that'll shift. But for now, you can have an impact very, very quickly.
Yeah, which is exciting. It's really exciting. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about keyword strategy and thinking about content as that first pillar. A lot of teams are still building content, maybe like you would for traditional search around clusters of keywords. But you just mentioned that this is more about answering questions. So what does an AEO content strategy look like in practice around, keyword optimization and what do you see that's working right now?
A few things. Exactly to your point, we are all used to saying, hey, I want to be known for these topics and representing them as a cluster of keywords. Okay. In AEO, we take those same topics and we represent them as clusters of questions. Why? Because when we all learned to speak Google, we averaged 4 words per query. Now we're having, as we all know, conversations with the LLMs. The average query is 23 words long. It's a fully formed question. The average person, when they go to a site, has had more than 100 words of back and forth with the LLMs. So our job is to help give the LLMs the content that answers those questions. If you know them fundamentally, but if you want inspiration, go run an LLM over your sales call recordings. That's literally ground truth. Those are literally the questions people are asking. Go run an LLM over your sales emails, over your support emails. They are all good sources of here are the questions I should answer. Okay, that's step one. Step two, go answer those questions throughout the funnel. I'll pick on Webflow. Like, what's a good CMS? Compare these two CMSs. How long will it take to implement? How much does it cost? Throughout the funnel. And then answer them in depth. Why? Because just as we were saying a minute ago, the tail is getting longer. People are able to share more of what they are looking for, qualify it more. And so the value of answering in more depth has grown. One misconception I hear then is people saying, well, got it. The head is dead or upper funnel is dead. I should only focus my site on long tail, lower funnel content. And with humility, I think both of those, the data doesn't support them. It is true. The data does show that upper funnel questions tend to, in the LLMs, get pointed to not your website more often, a review site, a community site, some other place. But the LLMs still look at your site as the most authoritative source. And so if you want your message pulled through, which presumably all of us do, that upper funnel content visible and easily consumable by the LLMs. And then in addition, go extend that tail on your site. I'll make up a silly example, poking at Webflow. Like in SEO time, would I ever write a blog post that's like, how would I personalize for someone in New York on a weekday on a mobile device who saw this campaign? Like, of course not. That's way too taily to put in content. In AEO time, maybe. Okay, that specific example is silly, but like the notion that you would go further down the tail, it's not a nutty thing to think about in AEO time. And ultimately, all of it, it's about, again, creating genuinely useful content that helps your prospects through the funnel.
And you could take that last statement, genuinely useful content that pulls people through the funnel, and we could just be talking about SEO to that point about like, it's an evolution of SEO. It's not a throwaway of it, because that is the content that was winning in search before generative AI was so broadly in everyone's hands, right? As useful, unique, move people through the funnel, answer some questions, even the long tail search, right? Where it was going from 2 to 3 words to 7 words to 12 words, right? So that 23 word average is blowing my mind right now, actually. But yeah, it's hard to optimize for a keyword or a key phrase of 2 or 3 words when people are using 23 to ask their questions. But I love that, even if the top of funnel content, like you said, is coming from a review site or maybe a directory or some other source, if the LLMs are looking for consensus, there has to be those other examples that they can find that are matching what they're seeing there. So that becomes really important too.
Fully aligned.
Yeah, amazing. Now, I have a question. This next question, I want to talk about schema, which you've talked about it being one of the biggest opportunities in AI search. And what I find interesting, so recently I mentioned that Ahrefs study that came out, And one of the findings, if you're familiar with that study from a couple of weeks ago, was they said there's zero correlation between schema usage and visibility in AI results. And so my question when I saw that data, and I'm curious what you think, is like, what, I think they're just measuring the existence of schema being there. But how do you put that in place to make sure it's actually useful and set up correctly and working? Like what's gonna separate schema that actually helps versus something that's just ticking the box because we know we need to have it on the site and maybe people aren't doing it right?
Great question. And awesome study by Ahrefs. Their data is among the most authoritative in the industry, and it resonates a lot.
Yeah.
How could I say that and the other thing at the same time? Two thoughts to frame. One, I think all of this is in the broader context of making it really easy for the LLMs to consume your content. And there are many ways to do that. Schema is one, and I'm still a big believer in it. I'll talk about that in a second. But like, you could add a table of contents to your site. We tried that. And by we, I mean Vivian Huang, who runs our SEO AEO team. And in 4 weeks, we saw 59% more traffic from LLMs, 23% more traffic from search, just by putting table of contents there. You could take your content and structure it as bullets. You could put the TLDR up top. There's some data to suggest that LLMs, after they've ingested the whole thing, will consume and process 20 to 30% of the page. Kevin Indig found this, and then decide, are they going to process the rest of it? And so maybe you put some more punchline up at the top. You could try putting FAQs on the page. So there are a bunch of things you could do to structure the content on the page itself. But remember, you're writing for humans. I hear some people saying, oh, I'm going to chunk up my content because I hear that makes it easier for the LLM to consume. I'm happy that Google said, don't do that. Remember, you are writing for the humans, either directly or indirectly through the machine. And so like we tried, for example, to the earlier topic about answering questions, playing the Jeopardy TV game show and reframing the title of a blog post as a question, 13% more traffic. None of these results are statistically significant in sharing what we've experienced. But we were like, okay, great. We'll do that more often, but where it makes sense because we're still writing for humans. So then schema, metadata, just as you said, we've been putting metadata on our sites forever so that machines can more easily understand the structure and meaning of our content. We did it with search metadata. Our B2C friends do it with Facebook Open Graph. Schema is another one that most of us know. For the some who don't, Google, Facebook, Yandex, Yahoo, not Facebook, Google, Yahoo, Yandex, Bing, 6, 7, 8 years ago created this. Just another way to tag your content with data that the machines see, but the humans don't. And there are hundreds of them. There's like, here's a blog page, here's a product page, here's a company page, here's a bio page. Okay. Ahrefs, what they actually tested, they took pages that already had over 100 citations, added schema, and measured lift. They got close to nothing. I totally believe that. If a page is already getting widely cited, it seems realistic to me that bolting on schema will not make it get cited more. But that's one slice. If you look at the whole web, most pages don't have schema at all and aren't cited widely. 73% of Google's top 10 search results have schema, but only 12% of sites have schema on them. And by the way, if you look at B2B only, it's like 2% of sites, and most of that schema is broken formatting wise. So I think if you look across all pages, including those that aren't cited as often as we would like, then there actually is a real impact to be had. And so where does it rank in the stack rank if you got your page well cited? Maybe it's marginally lower. For most folks, I think that if you were only to do 2 things related to AEO, assuming your SEO fundamentals are in place, it's surprising how many sites don't have SEO metadata and have broken internal links. If that's the case, don't focus on AEO, just go do those. But if you only did 2 things, given that those are in place, answer questions and add schema. why is it so hard? Why do only 12% of sites have them? It's one of the few places I can think of where you really actually need a marketer and a developer in the same room at the same time. And you and I both know that that practically never happens. And so finding a way to auto generate schema so that you can empower the marketer to do it in a way that the engineers are happy with, in my humble opinion, that's a big part of the solve. And I think Ahrefs data is excellent. Oh, actually, they themselves said, hey, if you have no, pages cited by AI were 3x more likely to have clean schema on them than not. That's across all pages rather than the pages that already are cited a bunch. So I think both are true. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think the headline finding on that study might have been a little misleading because it definitely, to hear you say if you're doing two things, it's answer the questions and add your schema. And that study was sort of leading me away from that, saying, actually, don't focus too much on this. Don't worry. You don't have to do the technical thing. Just have your useful content and, follow some of these other recommendations. So I think that's really interesting. And I think it also speaks to just like the time that we're in of discovery and learning and experimentation with this stuff, right? Because it's so new for marketers to be thinking about, well, how do we show up on the LLMs and how do we measure how we're doing there? You talked about, traffic from the LLMs, right? And that's only part of the measurement because most of the time people aren't clicking a link on ChatGPT to go to your site. You're getting mentioned. And then what happens? They go and find you somewhere else, some other way that we can't track. So it's just it's exciting and also scary, but an interesting time to be learning and experimenting and kind of seeing where we're going with this whole new world.
Couldn't agree with you more. And it is kind of joyful to have the learning curve be like this again for everyone. If curiosity is in you, this is a great time to be.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So great. Let's talk about some of these other going through the pillars, the authority side of things. So we talked about the SEO foundation, and with SEO, building authority meant building backlinks, right? And now LLMs, as you mentioned, are looking for consensus across different sources. So that playbook is totally different. What does building authority look like today for you? And what plays are you seeing that might be driving more citations than others?
Great question. I think that the things exactly to your point, that the LLMs are valuing incrementally more. Well, first, keep the foundation. To our discussion, being good at search helps you be good at AEO, and search really relies on backlinks. Don't stop. Second, the incremental thing is plain text mentions widely. So being in a top 10 list, being on a review site, having a third-party article written about you, those all contribute meaningfully more to AEO than they did to search. Full stop. Again, to the discussion earlier, then talking about yourself consistently, which is typically the function of brand, is valuable. Having lots of people talk about you, often a function of PR, is back. So is community. The LLMs have said, hey, the LLM, value authentic human content. I don't want just the marketing speak. And so they have chosen to incrementally cite more often YouTube, which is now the number one cited source, Reddit, which is number one in perplexity, number 3 overall, G2, number one among B2B review sites, LinkedIn, number one when you're asking B2B professional kinds of questions. Those are all communities where you can exist. A couple of important caveats on them. To our discussion earlier about how inexpensive or expensive is it for the LLMs to crawl you, they are not actually crawling the videos of YouTube, nor are they crawling the images or videos on your site. What they are doing is crawling the transcript. So the transcript of your YouTube on your site or on YouTube or on your site, that they are consuming voraciously. On the images, they're consuming the alt text. another form of metadata that is really useful to them and good for accessibility. That's one. Two, on Reddit, I feel like a lot of ink has been spilled on Reddit. I think rightfully so. It does have a bigger impact than it did before. Two things about it. One, organic Reddit is where marketing speak goes to die. Like there are so many examples of well-intentioned marketers showing up in a subreddit, posting something that was normal marketing talk, promoting the company, not saying they were with the company, and just getting very flamed, like burnt to a crisp, potentially damaging brand. If you're going to do Reddit organic, go pick the subreddits, the topics you want to be in. Go learn the norms. And then only engage if you're really ready to say things that we as marketers are not typically ready to say, like, we got that wrong. We're not good at that. I'm sorry. Those are things that don't normally come out. But if you're not ready to say those things, don't engage organically on Reddit. And Reddit would say this themselves. If you do, however, want to be there and you're not ready to do that, go buy ads. The LLMs are under differentiating right now between paid and organic content, and ads on Reddit. Normal marketing speak is more accepted than it is others than it is in the organic. And the last thing we talked earlier about those review sites being cited more often for earlier stage questions, the data really does support it. And so making sure that, your profile in G2, your profile in Wikipedia, those are cited along with your site and used as touchstones for the LLMs as they are looking for that consensus. Does this land for you, Jen?
Oh, it totally lands. And well, first of all, everything you've said about Reddit and how intentional your community strategy has to be in order to show up there authentically, like that is one area where I kind of tell people all the time, huge opportunity. Do not go there if you're not ready to really invest some time and energy into it. I think it's really interesting that the ads on Reddit are having an impact on LLMs, which is not really something I knew. So now I'm having some other thoughts about that. But there are some great ways to show up authentically as a brand on Reddit. There's ways to own your own subreddits and be there from an educational perspective, but you also do have to be ready to take feedback from your customers and respond in an authentic way. So you're totally right. That is a risky endeavor if you're just going to take something from another channel and publish it on Reddit. It doesn't work. It has to be dedicated. It has to be authentic. It has to be about building community and showing up in a way that is generous, I think, as opposed to looking for citations. The YouTube piece, I feel like, what an opportunity. What an opportunity that is your channel. You own that. And to build that consensus from other sources. And if everything on your blog is already in the spirit of being useful and unique, then you have the foundation for your useful and unique educational content on YouTube as well. And huge opportunity there to be cited. I've been pushing when generative AI was really kind of taking off and a lot of people were writing what we all refer to as AI slop articles, right? Hey,
Did you use the past tense on that?
I mean, I'm sort of like, I cringe when people say it, but I also
no, but they're still doing it.
Doing it. Yes. I just feel like we should be done with this by now, but it's still happening. And so this whole, like, I've been talking to my clients and my audience about the importance of using video, even just as an antithesis to that, to say, hey, you can tell the difference between my content and my neighbor's content because I'm a real human being having a conversation with you right now. So you can trust that that's coming from my mouth, not from, hey, write me an article about X topic, right? But now seeing the impact that YouTube is having on LLM citations is like, it's exponentially more valuable to be investing in video. And I don't even mean investing budget in video, because you can do it in a really scrappy way. You don't have to spend a lot of money on video. You just have to, again, show up authentically, be helpful and useful, and be smart about your publishing strategy. And all of a sudden you have a whole nother channel that you really do own, because a lot of the other ones you're talking about, Reddit is hard to own. Wikipedia, it's hard to write your own Wikipedia pages. Not everything gets accepted on Wikipedia. You don't own third-party articles being written about you. It's a PR strategy thing. So YouTube feels like just the biggest opportunity to me.
It lands for me so strongly, and the receptivity to this video now feels so much higher, right? That people are like, oh, that's genuine. Even if it was a highly produced vertical video, the fact that it looks that way, and the just the walking down the street. Go take the questions that came up, think about what you want the answers to be. Go walk down the street, video that, just post that. That's an inexpensive way to start. To your point about not needing more budget.
Yeah, totally. And just get going. And it's really hard. I myself have tried to do those walking and talking and answer questions videos, and you get 2 or 3 done in a few weeks, and then it falls off the radar. But the more impact that it's going to have, then you're going to make the argument for yourself to really get out there and do it. And even better, like for us, we connect our video and written strategy together. So when we're let's create once and publish everywhere, right? We don't have to have a separate blog strategy from our podcast strategy, right? Let's talk about the same topics. Let's answer those questions in both places. And if you take one thing and reproduce it into another thing, then we're killing so many different birds with one stone, and really, making a lot out of one thing. And that omni-channel strategy that's always been so important in marketing is even more important now, knowing that the LLMs are looking for consensus in those different channels.
I couldn't agree more, and it feels so much more possible. I can't tell you how many years I, as a marketing leader, would ask my team, "Hey, we did all the hard work. We created this long form content. Pretty please just chop it up and repurpose it and make it tweets or LinkedIn posts or YouTube videos or whatever it might be." And it so rarely happened, as was the case for everybody. I had the privilege of working with great marketing teams. But this friction point, I feel like the friction has gone down a bunch with LLMs and their ability to help us do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's such an exciting time.
It is.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about measurement, because this is a little bit of a mystery in some ways, in terms of how straightforward it used to be to measure SEO, right? Impressions and clicks and position. But the ranking piece is gone in AI search. And to your point about how quickly you could start being mentioned, it's just as quickly you could stop being mentioned on these in these different sources. So can you talk about some of your recommendations for how you measure the impact of your AEO efforts, and how do we know that all our hard work is paying off?
Great question. And I think it's so important for us as we are setting expectations internally about why we're devoting this time and energy to this. And I think that just like overall, our fundamental job as marketers hasn't changed. We are building demand by building a brand, and then converting that demand to revenue by driving growth. Okay, here in measurement, we are trying to ensure that we drive traffic to our site ultimately from the places where people are and convert it. And so we surveyed 400 marketers, and they said the first things they did, in my humble opinion, are very much the right things. And that's use the tools you have already and see, how much human referred traffic am I getting from LLMs? The bot traffic is interesting, but it's the human traffic that's driving the revenue. So how much am I getting? At Webflow last summer, 8% of our self-serve conversions came from LLM referred traffic. And then look, again, existing tool, how is that converting? And to a person, every CMO I have spoken with said much, much, much better, like shockingly much better. At Webflow, human referred LLM traffic converts 6 times better, not 6%, 6x better than unbranded organic search, which I think is the fair comparison, which to our discussion speaks to the conversation people are having with LLMs, speaks to them being, on average, more qualified further down the funnel. Ahrefs and SEMrush found that to be 4x to 23x. It's a lot more. Okay, so that's where you start. Then you go to exactly where you were pointing, the precursor to that. Did I show up? How did I show up? How should I think about that? And to your point, deterministic ranking doesn't exist anymore. Rand Fishkin had a team run a zillion queries and about vendors and found the odds of getting recommended the same set of brands twice from an AI tool are under 1 in 100. And the odds of getting the same list in the same order is about 1 in 1,000. Think about that compared to search. Okay, you and I will get 2 different search answers because Google's personalizing, but we'll get the same answer a couple of minutes from now. These are the same people trying it over and over again. Okay, so then that means we need to measure this whole thing, AEO, probabilistically. We're measuring not what was my rank, but did I show up? So people often look at mentions and citations as the first step. This is often now with the new tool. And then they look at some PR-like things. What was my share of voice? So did I show up? You'll say, what percentage of the time did I show up or get cited for among the questions I care about, what we talked about earlier? Then how often did I show up relative to the competitors I care about for that same set of questions? And then the highest level of maturity, I would argue, is what was my message pull through? Like, did the LLMs take my carefully crafted words and just reduce me to a set of features? Was it accurate? Did the LLMs like really confidently get it wrong? And what was the sentiment? Was it positive? Was it negative? Again, a whole bunch of PR-like terms. And the last thing I'll share on measurement is to retrain everyone around us, whom we have spent years training, that up and to the right is good on organic search traffic, and say, you know what, actually there's a different dynamic now for a few years while the world is changing before it settles down again. This thing is 15, 20 years old, search. Now we've got this other bucket of traffic that's smaller, growing exponentially, converts a whole lot better, but like totals for most folks are going down. Not like this, but like a little bit. Mm-hmm. Don't be upset at that. I mean, you can be upset, but like it's not bad in the way it was bad 2 years ago. Now most are seeing single digit, low double digit percentage drops while they get this other bucket of traffic that's converting much better. Mm-hmm. How's that land for you, Jen?
Yeah, it's good, right? It's not perfect, right? Like there's so much wiggle room in this, and that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable as we've been trained for many years to attribute, right? We need to attribute our traffic and we need to attribute our every dollar, and the signals are really strong. But it's very challenging. And I think, as you were talking about Rand Fishkin's work that he was doing and the how quickly things are changing. I just had someone last week ask me, they said, we talked to did a discovery with a potential new customer. I said, how'd you find us? And they said, you were recommended on ChatGPT. And she said, I even asked her the exact question and we can't replicate it. We can't get ourselves to show up in the way that she did. And what I explained, having to come up with an answer before having this conversation with you, I said, you have to imagine that they didn't just ask a question and get a response. They had a long conversation that led them to you. So even if they gave you the original question, like, who knows what different paths they went down before you got that recommendation, right?
100%. And they've got a long history. So even if you had the exact same conversation in that session, you've got different history than I do than that prospect did.
For sure. For sure. So people, I think, are feeling a bit like this is a mystery. Even I've been told directly that I got cited here and I can't measure it. I can't feel it and see it myself. I can't replicate it. That is a scary place to be. But I have tested out some of the new tools, and there are some out there that are really great. And they're getting to a place that I think search never did, which is persona and category, and really understanding, like, well, who is searching and who's getting fed this information, and is it accurate, and is it an accurate representation of what you've written, or has it been rewritten? All of that kind of information, which we never really had in search. We saw that you came up ranking first and didn't realize that phrasing was being used in another industry by other people, right? And actually all that traffic is not your buyer. We were never able to measure that on Search Console. And now we're able to see that in a different way. And some of these LLM measurement tools, which I think is really exciting. But it's definitely a transition period, and having to retrain ourselves and our stakeholders as to what's important is a challenge.
Strongly aligned. Yeah, fully aligned.
Now, before we wrap up, and I know you've kind of woven this in throughout as we've talked, but I'd love to hear, a real-time example, real-life example of some impact in actively pursuing all four of these pillars, and what kind of impact that can have, bringing a brand from not visible in AI search to actively cited and converting. Can you just walk through what the team did and some of the impact?
Sure thing. There are too few examples of this out there now. I'm sure that will change. I think there's a lot more activity than there is public sharing yet. And so I'll pick on us, only because we've intentionally tried to share what's worked, what hasn't, the successes, the failures. Little old Webflow has number one share of voice in the questions we care about. We are mentioned or cited in 67% of the questions we care about. How? Did not start there. We talked about a couple of examples, some other ones. In content, turns out freshness matters. 95% of the citations in ChatGPT were updated in the last 10 months. The median was 6 months ago. Okay, most of us have content that's older than that sitting around. We increased the speed of content updating by 5x. Same humans, same hours, same creativity. Did not put out just straight AI. Our friends at Graphite happily have found that is not working. 85% of the citations in Google are either human or human plus some LLM. The I'm gonna spam the world is not working. But still, that 5x led to, in 2 months, 42% more traffic for those pages. Same humans, 42% more traffic. I want that. And of course, because it's marketing, traffic went up, so conversion rate went down? No. Conversion rate went up 14% because it was more qualified traffic. Okay, content example. On the technical, we were talking about schema and other metadata before. Vivian and team took our top 6 product pages as another example and added FAQs to the bottom. Same content up above, added FAQs, added schema to those FAQs. In 2 weeks, more than half of the incremental citations Webflow overall got, 57%, came from those 6 pages. Okay, that's interesting. It blew my mind when you realize we have 250,000 pages on our site. Those 6 got 57% of the new ones, and they also got 24% more traffic. And so, huge impact. When we, on authority, referenced other sites, other data, other expertise, 14% more traffic from LLMs, 8% more traffic from search. And then in measurement, we thought hard about, to your point, learning curves like this. We're all figuring this out. And so let's apply the same mental model we apply to paid ads, conversion rate optimization, marketing mix, which is, let me measure, Let me have a hypothesis based on that. Let me implement that and go round and round and round again. And so for our AEO measurement, that's exactly what we do. We measure, we use AI to generate ideas, and we're like, yeah, we like those, we don't like those. We come up with some ourselves. AI then proposes, hey, here are the things you should do. Here are the specific implementation of those. Yes, no, change, and then rinse and repeat. We do that in our own product, and it has led to being able to really scale the efforts in a genuinely valuable way, not the AI slop, always human in the loop, grounded in our voice, grounded in the actual product itself to date. And so that's been a bit of our journey with many. That all sounds like, oh, it all worked. Tons of stuff didn't work. Tons of stuff failed. But though we were able to, in a matter of months, take #1 share.
Amazing. That's such a huge, I think, success story and example. If that's not a good enough example for everyone that's listening to, learn a little bit more about this stuff and try your hand at it, it's just a learning experience for everybody. You just have to try this stuff and learn from the ones that it's working. I've learned a ton in this conversation, so I can't thank you enough for your time and coming to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Jenn, I am grateful to be able to join you. I enjoyed this a ton. I learned from you as well. And may I offer one thing to listeners?
Yes, absolutely.
Those 4 categories, we made up 5 different levels of maturity across them. So you get this table, 4 categories, 5 levels, this big grid, fine. We then created a tool to assess your site against that whole rubric. No pitch, it talks about stuff Webflow doesn't do. So it's not like I assess that your problem is lack of paying me money. Like, it's not that. Yeah. If you go to webflow.com/AEO, MA for maturity assessment, so webflow.com/AEOMA, put in your domain, we will run 250,000 lines of code, 3,000 lines of prompt, look on your site, off your site, and suggest, here's what we see in all 4 of these categories. Here are the gaps. Here's what we suggest you do next, down to like specific pages. Here's an important page that was updated 204 days ago. We suggest you go update that. No pitch. We hope it's helpful. And if you have data and experiences, please share, because we're all learning it together.
I love it. I've got to go put my site into the webflow.com/AEOMA thing right now. That's an amazing tool. So thanks for putting that together.
Thanks for the chance to share here. And I'm super curious if it lands for you, what you see, and if you try some of the things, how it goes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, Guy, and for walking us through how you rank AI in search. I hope everybody follows Guy on LinkedIn. Go check him out. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcasts. Join us next time for more conversations